want to welcome you to your studies at Indiana Bible College. My name is Kenny Noble, and I'll be your instructor for these lectures on fiction writing. In this lecture, we want to look at the story problem. I want to point out that plot is not the same as the story problem. Plot is a little different, and we'll be looking at that in a later lecture. It could be said that the story problem is the obstacle that stands in the way of the character from reaching his or her goal. The story problem may be a quest to obtain something, or it might be an escape story where the main character has to escape a situation, or it might even be a mystery story where the story problem is finding the solution, discovering who done it, who murdered the victim. In this short lecture, I'd like to point out a few things that I believe are important elements in a good story problem. Most writers don't lack for ideas. We usually have more ideas than what we can use. It's just implementing those ideas that give us a problem. The fact that you're here listening to this lecture means you probably have a story idea. Hopefully, it's a good story idea. And if it is a good story idea, you should be able to put that story idea into one succinct sentence of 40 words or preferably less. Now, that's not always easy to do, but it's necessary, because if you can't put your story idea into one sentence, then you probably do not have a good story idea. Here are some one-sentence summaries from story ideas. Maybe you'll recognize some of these stories. A foster girl with a cruel stepmother must go to the ball, and then the prince must find the girl who fits the slipper. That one-sentence summary of just 24 words give us a good idea of the story problem for Cinderella. Let's look at a couple from novels that I've written. A convicted murderer switches places with her twin sister and escapes prison with 7 days to prove her innocence. Here's another one. An accountant in a government office must submit to her supervisor's advances in order to obtain proof he is killing disabled men in order to reduce his department's budget. So I suggest you take the time to write a one-sentence summary for your story. This is important because first, it'll help you focus. Also, it'll help you when someone asks you what your story is about. You'll not only be focused, but you'll appear confident. In addition, when you publish your story, the publisher is going to ask for a one-sentence summary. And I must warn you now that they'll also ask for a synopsis of your story, which they expect to be usually within 2 or 3 pages. Sometimes they'll want you to reduce your story down to a one-page summary. So this will be good practice. The second thing I want to point out about story problem is that your story problem must be big enough to sustain reader interest throughout the length of your story, whether it's a short story or a 300-page novel. The problem must be almost impossible for the main character to solve. If you have a story problem where a couple characters can sit down and talk it out and resolve the situation, then really you do not have a story problem that will attract reader interest. Your story problem should be that somebody wants something and somebody else is going to keep them from getting it. And both parties are willing to make great sacrifices to get what they want. So, up the stakes on your story problem. Decide what's the worst possible thing that could happen to your main character, and that's usually what should happen. And you'll increase your reader interest if both parties, that is the good guy and the bad guy, if both of them have a good reason for wanting their goal. The bad guy shouldn't be all bad, and the main character shouldn't be all good. But create a dilemma in your story for both characters, and you'll increase your reader interest. The reader wants to become involved in the character's fight to achieve the goal, and they want to know that there is going to be a fight. As readers, we live vicariously through the actions and thoughts of the main character, and it's our job as writers to give the reader the experience, the entertainment, and the emotional struggle that they've come to expect to find on the page. Keep in mind that the main problem, the story problem, doesn't necessarily have to be the first problem that the main character encounters at the outset of the story. And in fact, it's probably best that the main storyline problem is not shown at the very first page. There should be a problem on the first page, but it's best that we get to know the character and see what their normal life is like before we upset their world with this big story problem. That way we see the contrast and we can see why it's a problem for the main character that they've had to face this new problem. So your main problem, the storyline problem, does not necessarily have to be on page 1. And often, in fact, usually, it is not the first problem that the main character encounters. Again, because as readers, we would like to see what their life is like before their world gets turned upside down by this problem that they're going to have to solve for the rest of the story. Next, be sure that your story problem has a resolution. The main character must be able to reach his or her goal by the end. It doesn't necessarily have to be the goal they thought they wanted at the beginning, although it usually is the same goal. But they must be able to reach the goal at the end of the story. And that achievement must be something that the main character has worked hard to get. It isn't fair to the reader that at the end of the story, all of a sudden the cavalry comes charging over the hill to save the main character, or that God performs a miracle. But we want to see the reader work hard for that goal that they reach at the end. And last of all, this story problem must be the worst thing possible that could happen to this character. They should be forced to step outside their box in order to reach this goal. And they'll be reluctant. They don't want to step outside their box, but the writer should force them to. And that's what makes the story interesting. So, for example, if the main character has been wounded in her past by a betrayed lover, where she can't trust anyone anymore, and trust is an issue with her, then this problem that she faces must require her to reach out and put herself on the line and trust someone in order to resolve her problem. Or if it's a whodunit story, then your main character must face the situation that they feared all their life. Perhaps it's the murder of an innocent child, or a case that they never could solve and the killer has come back and the main character has to face something that they never could face before. So hopefully these few ideas that I've given you about your story problem will be helpful to you to improve your story problem. And certainly looking at your story problem at the outset will assist you in reducing your revising time on your story at the end.